Welcome everyone to another one of our book clubs at Up a Notch Learning. Today we have this book called the Stepfamily Handbook that's authored by Karen Bonnell and Patricia Papernell. And we are very pleased to have with us today one of the authors of the book, Karen. Welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. This is just such a pleasure. I'm here with my two of my favorite Canadians ever.
So Karen is a mediator, co-parenting coach, and a four-time author who practices on the ground with families in Washington, USA, and has worked for over 30 years with couples and families facing transition, loss, growth, and change. So thank you again, Karen, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we also have with us today Amrit Malhotra, who, as you know, is a registered social worker with many years of experience working with families in Ontario, Canada. And she's joined us for every one of our book club episodes. So welcome. Thank you again for coming, Amrit.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we'll get started today by asking Karen some questions. So Amrit, do you want to get started?
Perfect. So our first question, Karen, is really to find out what inspired you to write this book. You can share a little bit about that.
Well, I can. I started out working with families in all dimensions when I was a psychotherapist. And then when I decided to really focus on families going through transitions like divorce, I became a divorce coach and co-parenting coach. And that was sort of my original training ground. But then lo and behold, my divorced parents would come back when they met someone new and they needed support about how to do that next step of family restructuring, the walk into step family, the stepping into step family. And I had read Patricia Papernell's book, Surviving and Thriving. Excellent book, by the way. If you have a degree in psychology is kind of how I see it. It was very wonderful, but boy, over the counter, not so much from my point of view anyway. So I approached Patricia and I said, let's write a handbook version of Surviving and Thriving. Let's write the version for you and me and anyone who is thinking about falling in love and is also a parent, because it starts there, falling in love. I'm falling in love, or I'm starting to date. That's where the book starts, right? So I went to Patricia and she said, oh my God, if I tell my husband I'm thinking about writing another book, he's going to divorce me. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be responsible for anybody's lifelong divorce here. So we'll just put this off. And I reapproached her 6 months later and I said, how's that marriage going? Can we write a book now? And that's how it got started. I really wanted a handbook version. And what I mean by that is like the co-parenting handbook, a very practical, a very real walk into step family for people to have.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I can tell you from my reading of the book, it really was just that. It was very easy to read, and it definitely encompassed all of the stages of that step family creation. So that actually leads us into our next question, which was talking about what the central idea or theme of the book is, and that really what it was about for me is it's about step families, but the interesting thing is it's from every single perspective. So it's not just from the parent who's now engaging, is falling in love. It's also from the perspective of the partner and what tips they can bring into the step family. There's also some parts about the co-parent, so the ex-wife or ex-husband, and also from the perspective of the kids. And so to me, it was really all encompassing, and that's what I loved about the book. And it also, then when we talk about every stage of a relationship, so it talks about when you're getting to know this person, the person that you're dating, to integrating children, to moving in together, remarriage, to a new baby for this new-ish couple. And it even goes into, towards the end of the book, it even goes into the gray divorce, and where there's adult children and integrating a step family when there's adult children, and then even a subsequent split of the step family and some issues around there. So as I was reading it, I kept thinking, That's amazing. How could I add, how could the author have added more? And wow, that's another leaf and another leaf and another leaf. And it really literally left no leaves unturned by the time I got to the end. So it really is that all-encompassing handbook.
Well, I really appreciate hearing that perspective, of course, as someone who's, when you write a book, you read it so many times that you don't see anymore, what other people see. But I will say that Patricia and I were so committed to trying to include the relevant pieces. And that
Mm-hmm.
even includes, what if a co-parent is deceased?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that happened before we started dating, or maybe while I'm dating you, your former wife, God forbid, gets breast cancer and dies. What does that mean for children? What does that mean for our relationship, right? So it really was an attempt to really address every corner of potential life in a restructuring family and what might impact children and how
Mm-hmm.
that impacts how we support kids in family transitions.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I would almost go so far as to call it an encyclopedia of sorts, because it is so all-encompassing, but yet it's a very easy to read encyclopedia, because you don't think of encyclopedias as really something easy, but it just it was very, very helpful, and I found it very easy as I was preparing for today. I found it very easy to get through, for sure.
Well, I'm really glad. The other thing that I just want listeners to know is that I had this is just a funny experience. So I had a co-parent call me to ask me about starting to date. And this was a woman in her 50s. And she said, I'm going to start to date, but I would like to get some pointers. And I said, well, and her name happened to be my name, Karen. We're a dime a dozen, so that's just not giving away a thing, is it? So I said, "Well, Karen, have you taken a look at the Stepfamily Handbook?" And she goes, "Oh my God, that totally scared me. I'm not talking about becoming a stepfamily. I just want to date." And it's like,
Mhm.
wow. Well, that was a highly valuable piece of information for me, because I wouldn't want anyone to be intimidated. Because the book starts, the whole first third is about, as a parent, what should
Mhm.
I be thinking about when I'm starting to date? The whole first 5 chapters, along with the communication skills I'm going to need and all kinds of
Mhm.
things that are really helpful before
Mhm.
we even introduce kids to who we're dating. And
Mhm.
so I want readers to know that we were really thoughtful about the whole walk. Every step into step family is part of what the book's about. So even if you never intend to remarry or live with
Mhm.
someone again, you never know when someone's going to cross your heart.
Mhm.
But you might want to start to date, and that's going to have an impact on your co-parent. It will also have an impact on your children if they know
Mhm.
about it.
Well, and part of it too is about is taking preventative measures. And so if you're only going to date, what can you do to make sure that you're impacting your children in the most positive way? As in,
Right,
when should you be involving your children and when should you not be involving your children? And so part of it too is that preventative piece.
right, right.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, Amrit, did you want to ask the next question?
Sure. So tell us a little bit about how you came up with the topics that you included in the book. I know that you're taking us through the journey of the parent family, but share a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, I think that between Patricia and I, we have 70 years of
Wow.
experience. I know we're both older than dirt. I hope she doesn't mind if I say
Oh
that.
my goodness.
um, so yeah, Patricia has, in fact, we're pushing 80 together these days, but so we had a lot to draw on. And
Mhm.
and so when we started
Mhm.
to lay out the book, we knew that we really wanted to start with just the idea of dating. And what we knew was that there were certain skills at the ground floor that you needed to have to be successful further down the path. So we use the metaphor of hiking, as you two know because you've read it, but it's like preparing for a hike. At the beginning you need certain equipment, but as the hike gets more steep or has more going on, you need other equipment and tools. And so we really wanted to prepare
Mhm.
people all along the way. we also both have a real commitment to what happens to children in family restructuring. So it's heavy on it's maybe I'll use the word complete on the developmental pieces, right? Because a 4-year-old is going to have a different experience of mama or dada dating than a 14-year-old, right? And so we really wanted people to be prepared for the fact that kids don't just get on the train. You know, it's like, oh, I'm dating and I'm so happy, aren't you? And it's like, no, this scares
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be dating. I don't want a step parent. I'm 14 and I have too many parents as it is. I've got two. That's too many already, let alone a third or a fourth.
Yeah.
So we really wanted people to have that developmental information. We felt like information about what if this relationship started as an affair was incredibly important because, you know, we do this work and we know that hearts don't fall in love by way of legal papers. They never have, they never will. And so sometimes relationships that are actually meant to be have started as an affair, and that's tragic and hard, and it has a huge impact on that path, on that part of the hike. And so we spent time with that. I already mentioned things like how did we decide to include if a co-parent had been deceased. And interestingly enough, that was our last chapter that we added. And it's not at the end of the book, as you know, it's there in the end of the second part of the book. The book's in 3 parts for the listeners. And that came to Patricia because she had been asked to review an article by a colleague who was writing an article on death in
Mm-hmm.
in step families, and she said, "Karen, this is a huge miss. We left this out." Well, at that point, I was thinking, "Oh my gosh." Like you said, encyclopedic, right? It's like, oh, do we have space for another topic that important? That important, right? And so we figured it out. And I actually think it turned out that the woman who was helping us edit the book, who was amazing, was a stepmom, and that was the situation. She was the stepmom to a partner whose previous partner had died. So the children's other parent
Mm-hmm.
had passed. So she was in that role as we're wrestling about how to include this in the book. And so it was really a confirmation and an affirmation that as we
Mm-hmm.
walked through and figured out all the important pieces, they all were important and they got
Mm-hmm.
included.
Mm-hmm.
So long
That's
answer
great.
to your question. I don't
Yeah.
even know if it was targeted very well.
Mm-hmm.
Great
Mm-hmm.
answer. No,
Yeah.
it's so
No,
And we
that's
do know,
wonderful.
oh, and I'll just add, and we do know that step families as a whole have a similar rate of completing or going through a divorce as original families, unless they're complex step families. And what do I mean by that? A complex step family is when we both have kids. So we often think, oh, it'll be easier. I have kids, you have kids, we're both
Mm-hmm.
parents, we get this gig. Okay, well, it's just double the trouble, folks. It's double the complexity. And so complex step families struggle a bit more.
Yeah.
And so when it came to talking about the maturing process of a step family, which we cover, living together in that maturing process, we felt like it was important also to address what happens if a step family needs to come to a close. That as much as we may have wanted this, it just
Mm-hmm.
didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's that was a great part about the acknowledgement of the complexities, and I think that was also a theme throughout the book was the complexity of these step families, and really being mindful of that, and that's why I think this book is so critical for people to read if they're thinking of as you said, dating, even not thinking of a step family, but just even thinking about dating. It's so critical to take in this kind of information to realize the slow and long journey that it is. But at the end of the day, it can be wonderful if you take those right steps.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It can grow your heart in ways that you would have never imagined and be so incredibly rewarding, right? But if we go into it with the wrong set of expectations, if we think the hike is supposed to go this direction when in fact it's going to take us over here,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a frustrating and complicated journey. And so knowing what's normal is really, really helpful. I was just
Mm-hmm.
talking to a dada tonight who wants to tell his kiddos that he's falling in love, right? And his co-parent's a little reluctant about that. Like, hey, I don't know. You guys haven't been together for 3 years yet. Well, no kidding, but he's ready to tell the kids. Uh, and the complicating factor about that is when you start bringing this up for kids, then what's all the cascading effect, right? Well, so we're talking about how do you simply say, hey, I'm starting to date, right? So
giving people time to adjust, giving everyone, when I say people, I mean
everybody,
everyone, not only yourself, but your co-parent, the kids, everyone involved, giving them that time to adjust.
right. And I realized that part of what I wanted to say there is, meanwhile, there's this person who's fallen in love too. She's out here and she's like, well, when am I going to get to meet kids? Is this not really a thing? You're not going to introduce me to your kids? What it feels like to be the person on the outside.
Yes.
Right? And to be patient and to understand this is not like, oh, I fell in love with you. Let's parent your kids together.
This really leads into actually the next question, talking about specific passages that Amrit and I have, of course, both read the book, and things that we really drew out. And the piece that really drew me was exactly what you're talking about, Karen, is at the dating phase, when and how do you involve your children? And you've really set out in the book some, this is at chapter 5, some really great concrete timelines for introducing new partners and the increasing involvement. And you say in the book that your suggestion is no earlier than somewhere around the 4 to 6 month mark. But what I really liked was the concrete tips. So, in gray throughout the book, you've got the sort of pieces that people can just read sort of on their own, which is all the tips. Intro, how do you introduce kids to your new partners? How do you introduce the kids to the partner's kids? And then it goes even into the timelines of, okay, so now you're 7 to 9 months together. Now you're 10 to 12 months together. Now you're doing the overnights. And I really like the part where you talk about how to prepare the kids for those overnights so that you avoid the teenager coming down in the morning when the partner has slept over on a Friday night, and Saturday morning the teenager comes into the kitchen and the new partner is there getting coffee, and the reaction is, what the hell is he doing there or she doing there? And so the preparation, that's really was impactful for me.
Right. Well, it's so fun when you realize that these kids are real people, and there's every single one of us was 13 or 14 at one point, and the last thing we wanted to run into in the kitchen in the morning when we're in our, we're in our robe and our hair is all wherever it is, and we're stumbling down there to get a little something, glass of milk or make a toast, and then there's a strange adult in the kitchen. Now, strange to a 14-year-old is you don't belong here right now. I don't care if I've known you for 6 months now at a barbecue, but suddenly to show up in my kitchen when I'm in my robe, way too personal, way too intimate, way too freaked out if I'm 14. And so how do we do that? How do we prepare our beloved when we say, yeah, you can't go in the kitchen. You need coffee, I'll get it for you. Because Madeline is going to be getting ready for school. And so we're going to take care of Madeline too. Right. But having that awareness, and I'll tell you, the stories in that book, don't they just tell it all?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
They just take the material and it's like, oh my God, I would have never thought of that. And yet when I read that little story, it's like, well, that's obvious.
Yeah, it humanizes it. It humanizes it.
It really does.
And I want to bring out another passage to humanize it that I thought was interesting, was the tuna fish story. And I was going to bring that up a little bit later, but it just sort of, it came to my mind as the tuna fish moment where the new partner is in the house and trying to very innocently make a tuna fish sandwich where they put all sorts of things in it, the celery and the mayonnaise and the, low fat mayonnaise and all of these things. And
on brown bread.
And on brown bread, yes, and is just making this beautiful sandwich for this lovely child that's in the kitchen. And the remark, of course, is, well, the child is used to the tuna fish with full fat mayonnaise and on white bread, and there's this very awkward moment. And so those oops moments as well are wonderful learning opportunities, but they can be really challenging. And so that was just a story that really came through in my mind.
Right. Well, I actually believe that that was an actual experience of Patricia's. I think that is an actual factual Peppernell moment. And I love that story as
That's
well.
funny.
And
Yeah.
so, but if I know that those things are going to happen, if I know that those differences are going to emerge in unexpected ways, then we can laugh together. We can say, I guess that was an
Yes.
oops moment, which is really different than me
Calling it
taking it,
out.
right?
Yeah.
And me taking it personally and going, I just sat here and made you the best tuna fish sandwich in the world, you snotty, selfish little person. It'd be easy to feel resentful, to feel hurt.
Yes.
Now we're all human. And we might for a moment feel that like, ouch, I just made you a tuna fish sandwich. Don't be so whatever. But if we know about the oops, if we know that that's going to happen, then we can grab ourselves and we can grab the 10-year-old who's just been snotty about a sandwich and say, I think we just had an oops,
Yeah.
right? And help us through it.
Amrit, what did you see as the part that you the certain passages that you wanted to bring out?
Sure. Thank you. I do really want to emphasize the loyalty binds. I think those tips that you provided were excellent. And the importance of just slowing down the request that the children participate in step family activities to ensure that there's soothing rituals like tucking kids into bed, meeting the outbursts with empathy rather than exasperation, and just providing those steady, loving boundaries. I really think that those are so great. Those, so that people don't personalize it and recognize that these are little beings that have feelings and thoughts and reactions to things that are being done. And there's so much that's out of their control. So I really think that this is great. Just to remind our viewers.
That's just so beautifully said by obviously skilled mental health professional. I love that, and for parents, it is really helpful to know that if you've raised healthy and emotionally intelligent children, they are likely to struggle with loyalty binds in a step family because we all have, if you look back to being in seventh grade, right? And you had your three best friends. I did, Jane and Joy, they were my best friends in seventh grade. And, on one day I might be best friends with Joy and Jane was on the outside, and the next day it'd be me and Jane, and Joy, the other one, or me and Joy and Jane would be on the outside, and then Jane and Joy would get together and I'd be on the outside, and everybody's feelings were getting hurt. Well, in it, for a child, they worry whether you ever do anything or not. That if I like Stephanie, Amrit, will that hurt your feelings?
Absolutely. No, just kidding.
Right. But now think about it if it's your mama, right? So if I
Yes.
like my parents' girlfriend, will I hurt my mama's feelings? If I like my parents' boyfriend, will I hurt my dad's feelings? So this is healthy. This is normal empathy on the part of a child, but it's also a loyalty bind. And so our job as parents is to acknowledge that that's going to happen. Having a step or a person in your life like, Sarah, I wonder if sometimes that's a little complicated for you in terms of how you feel about your mom. There's plenty of room for you to love all the people in your life. And for mama to be able to say, sweetheart, hey, honey, it's okay. I know that your other parent, your dad, your mom, has this beautiful person in their life, and it's okay. I want you to be safe and comfortable and loved and cared about, right? That release those loyalty binds.
I wanted to bring up one more passage that I had taken out of the book, was about the strengthening of next family relationships, and that was in chapter 4. And it's interesting because it was not as much about the step family part. It was more so about relationships in general and how to have a strong relationship and the communication skills and the and the skills generally that are needed. And you described 5 skills to a successful step family relationship, and I've got them listed here, so I'll just list them for our viewers. Calm yourself in the storm. listen to understand, switch out the defensiveness, balance 5 positives for 1 negative, and repair the hurts. The hurts, yeah. And I thought that was so, the whole chapter was so impactful because, you know, this could be applied to any relationship. This could even be, this chapter could be taken out, adjusted slightly, and put into a relationship book, just not even
Oh,
about
totally.
step families. And because what you're really trying to point out, that what I really took out of it, that I see you're trying to point out, is how you know, the communication, and how important that communication is and that relationship is, to build it on a really strong foundation. So I really appreciated that you added that into the book, even though it's not, I mean, there's some, of course, references about step families, but it really is more about relationships, and I was very pleased to see that.
You know, I appreciate you bringing that up. And that's part of what I was saying is that, you know, when we're leaving for the hike and we're getting ready to go deeper into this relationship, there are there's certain kinds of equipment we need to take. We better have a Swiss Army knife. We better know how to calm ourselves, because I got to tell you, it's going to get rocky. Here on this terrain up here a little ways, there's going to be some rocks and some boulders. There might be a flash storm that we might have to weather. So we better have a rain jacket. We better know how to switch out of defensiveness. Step families are complex, and the relationships are complex. It's not just that you and I fell in love and everything's going to be fine. And even over time, even if my 4-year-old falls in love with you right now as a step parent, that 4-year-old's going to become a 14-year-old. And trust me, there's going to be hands on hip, and she's going to look at you and go, "You are not my mother." And if that goes right into your heart after all the schlepping to every soccer practice that you've been schlepping for the last 10 years, we better know how to calm ourselves. We better know how to understand what just happened. Right? So we do hope to arm our travelers, our steppers, with what they need. And those are they're basic to all relationships, but they're particularly necessary with the complexity of step family.
Amrit, did you want to ask our next question?
Sure. So can you tell me, what kind of feedback have you received from clients that have been reading the book? Have you been getting any comments raised? Anybody writing to the author?
We're so lucky. And I think that it has been extremely well received. And it's research supported, which I think is also something. This isn't just a bunch of anecdotal stories that people kind of made up because I was in a step family, so I thought I'd write a step family book. This is really based on, as I said, between the two of us, 70 to 80 years of professional experience. So it's solid. And I think when people read it, that's what resonates. It's like, oh, this really makes sense. You don't have to like everything you read. I didn't like having to write that there are times when people feel like they're outsiders and it hurts their feelings. When you have your parent partner, your beloved, who you're in the middle of having an important conversation with, and suddenly their 13-year-old is screaming in their bedroom, and they go, "Just a second, I need to check in on Madeline." You're like, "Am I chopped liver?" Right? And so understanding that just is what it's like. Well, when people are reading it, they're like, "Oh my God, we're normal. Oh, I felt that way. Oh my." So that's how you work with it. So that's how you deal with it. So that's why I don't discipline the kids. So that's why it backfires. Like the book is full of that kind of opportunity to say, that makes so much more sense than that other way. One of the big mistakes that folks make when they fall in love and there are children involved is that they kind of have a secret hope that this will be a family like an original family. We all know what original families feel like, right? And there's always a wish that we're going to blend and we're going to be together and 8 is enough and it's all going to be wonderful. And that is made for TV. That isn't what happens. We're not banana mango smoothies. We don't just pour the teenagers with the 6-year-old and put them in a blender and everybody's happy. Even a 10 or 12-year-old with a new 6-year-old sibling is sick of cute and funny at the dinner table. And so really understanding that a step family doesn't feel like a next time family. And so there's lots of strategies that we use to build a sense of family, to build those relationships, but also what are the pop-off valves so it doesn't get too intense, like a boiler, right?
Mhm.
Very
Mhm.
funny story of a couple that I still work with, and they've been together for a number of years, and they just check in periodically. But my favorite story is the Costco story. They had decided that they were going to feel like a family. So they pack up the 4 kids between ages 4 and at that time 12, 4 kids between 4 and 12, which is a very normal family. That doesn't seem so unusual now, does it? Mom, dad, 4 kids, we're all going to go to Costco. Oh my goodness. And the one thing they learned from that was never again, right? Forcing family and trying to act like a family that's not ready, that's not there,
Yeah.
is going to be like a boiler, like a boiler
Mhm.
pressure, right? So the
Yeah.
book really helps with how to deal with that. How do you do it instead? Then what do you
Mhm.
do instead? Well,
Mhm.
there's lots of wonderful things you do instead.
Mhm. I don't know if any family would ever be ready to go, the 6 of us, to Costco. Doesn't matter how long
And
or
then there's
short.
that.
There's the
I've
next
got,
book.
I know I've got 3 children, and when my husband and I take our 3 children to Costco, it's just as much, um,
Pandemonium.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What's your favorite part of the book, Karen?
Well, I would say that my favorite part of the book is probably the part about understanding that for children, step family is often fraught with a lot of loss. And I think that surprises parents the most, because they're so happy that they've found a beloved. And it's often, and I would say 99% of the time, it's a wonderful human being that they're bringing into their children's life, but it doesn't change that for kids, when I used to just have you, I now have to share you with your new
Mhm.
person, and that's loss. And so I hope that we handled it well, but I think it's a way that helps parents understand why kids can struggle so hard about something that feels so wonderful to them,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Well, and
So
you really weaved that through the whole book, I would say, because it impacts every stage of the relationship.
yeah, yeah. The thing about the complexities, the 5 complexities of step family, they show up right when you start dating. And once you can identify them, it's really helpful to go, oh, that's that thing. We just had the experience of that thing that they wrote about in the book, which is very reassuring. Because then once we know what the thing is, then we can go to those gray boxes and go, what do we do about that thing? Right?
Mhm.
What's how do we deal with that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I found it was very respectful, like I have to say, of that the outsider kind of coming into the insider group. I thought it was very respectful of this new love, even in the language. It was very inviting and soft, right? And so I thought that was beautifully done.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we help a couple who's in love who continue to have these experiences where their feelings get hurt because of insider outsider dynamics? And those are inherent in every step family, it's unavoidable. So, we all love the Gottmans for this, which is how do we help them remember to turn toward? At a time when they want to turn away. Their feelings have just been hurt. I want to turn away from you. And I think, gosh, will you just do something about those kids? Right? That's a very common experience for the outsider parent or the outsider step parent who's coming into a family. Um, and they need those skills. They need to know how to turn toward.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And have empathy for what that's like.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the piece that I found very helpful and refreshing in the book was from the perspective of the partner, and really this book would be very helpful for a partner to read, whether that partner has kids or not, would be very,
Yeah.
especially if they don't have kids, really to help them to understand what their new love is really going through, the one who has kids, because that is a unique struggle. We hope it doesn't become a tug of war, but it is a bit of an emotional tug of war where, you've got your new love and you've got your children, and you've really got those emotional strings that are being pulled in different directions.
Absolutely. We call that being stuck inside. It's a stuck insider,
Mhm.
and I feel a little bit as that parent, I'm kind of damned if I do and damned if I don't. And as the parent who was in a step-family relationship, that's the role I clearly identified with, which is what my children needed and how my partner experienced those needs. And
Mhm.
often those needs that I sensed that my children had, my partner experiences unnecessary, that the kids actually didn't need those things that I was indulging. That's a really tricky place to try and live in, and that has to be resolved. Obviously, it's really important.
Mhm. Mhm.
I really like the way
Absolutely.
you would give a scenario and then give an alternate way of communicating with one another, because I think that was a very good way of demonstrating how you can kind of de-escalate and be empathetic, and I think that was very valuable,
Mhm.
and very real circumstances you speak about in the book. So
Right.
relatable.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Good. Good.
Amrit, what part would you say impacted you the most?
Wow, there was just so many. I really enjoyed the 6 core needs that apply to kids of all ages if you want a healthy, thriving step family. And I'm just going to list them for everyone. Secure attachment and positive engagement with parents, opportunity to adequately resolve the impact of previous changes that they may have experienced, adults who understand and respect their basic temperament, experiences that help them build self-confidence, and the space to express themselves and be heard. I honestly, there were so many parts in this book that I almost wish I could photocopy and laminate and kind of put throughout the house to kind of like remind. And I think I might do some of that. I think these are wonderful.
Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. I think the other
Mhm.
thing that, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say the other thing that people often don't understand is that when they marry a parent, like if I were to marry you, Stephanie, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get your 3 beautiful children in some way, shape, or form, whether we're best friends or we're, just getting to know each other, but I'm going to get your husband,
Mhm.
right? In other words, that co-parent, the children's other parent, is an ever-present part of our relationship.
Mhm.
And it's not so much that they literally are walking in the front door, although that might be happening too. They are literally being brought through the front door and to the dinner
Mhm.
table at every transition.
Mhm.
And understanding that is such a valuable part of walking into a step family. You don't
Mhm.
get to box that person out.
Mhm.
Yes, we're
Mhm.
divorced and we're parents forever,
Mhm.
is a
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The part that I pulled out that impacted me the most was the impact on a step family when the relationship has started out as an affair, and that's
Mm.
in chapter 9. Um, and it's very difficult because, of course, the partner, the parent, and the partner are madly in love and are having a hard time, of course, having everyone else in their world catch up to that. And so there's so many very intense emotions, and how you really go through very well how much more slowly the step family integration may be when there is an affair present. And so I really that to me was very impactful. And you talk a lot about how to repair that damage, because that does create, of course, as we all know, that does create a lot of damage and an extra layer than if you were simply to repartner after the relationship ended. And so that damage does take that extra quite a bit of time to integrate those step families. So that was really impactful for me.
Yeah, yeah, not insurmountable,
Hmm.
but it absolutely prolongs the adjustment period, and again, those loyalty binds for children. This situation they may be clear that this is part of how our family had to change is because of this, and so there's just a lot of complicated feelings about it. And parents exercising strong parenting muscle during that time to make sure that they are re-engaging with their children and creating a secure base again, as Amrit, you pointed out before, how important that security is, and also repairing the relationship with the co-parent. That to the extent that that's possible, that's a really valuable step if it's possible. Yeah.
I wanted to go through, Amrit and I have both got a question that we wanted to ask you. And so, Amrit, did you want to go first, or did you want me to go first?
Go right ahead, Stephanie.
Okay. So one of the interesting pieces I thought in the book was around the step-parent discipline. And so I thought I would take an opportunity to ask you if you could expand or a little bit on your view of the step-parent discipline. You talk about connection, not correction, and the idea that for a step-parent, it's about building that relationship that's most important. And I find your perspective in the book is so invaluable, and I'd love if you could just expand on it a little bit for our viewers.
You bet. So keeping in mind that kids really do have parents, and that those parents have a responsibility with each other and for their children to determine, what's appropriate discipline and limit setting and structure and this and that and this and that. And when a third adult comes in, bringing their own values around structure and messiness and loudness and all that good stuff, and try to impose that on children before adequate relationship is built, children will just rebel. Now, they may adapt at the front end, so they might get away with 3 to 6 months of adapting and doing what a new step parent might be saying, but that will not last because there's not an adequate relationship there to support someone else telling me what to do or punishing me or disciplining me in some way, telling me they're going to take away my cell phone. Well, good luck with that. You might get away with that 2 or 3 times, and then we're going to have some real heck to pay. And so we really encourage step parents to allow parents to stay in the saddle as the disciplinarian. Now, that doesn't mean that a step parent doesn't have a say. It just means it's not a disciplinarian say. So if you're home after school with me, if the kids are home with me after school, and Stephanie, I know that the rule is that they get to have a snack and then they need to do homework table for an hour before they get their iPads, right? And I'm home with them, but that's not what they're doing. I'm not going to discipline them. What I am going to do is I'm going to say, you know what, Amrit, you know what Mama says, that you have a snack and do an hour homework table before you get your iPad out. I kind of don't think you're going to want to be explaining this to her when she comes home. But I'm not going to go over there and grab that iPad away. That's not going to be my job because I don't have that relationship yet with Amrit where she's going to see that as loving. She's going to see it as an interloper and an intruder. And so why get off on the wrong foot? I might be right. That iPad should be put up. And it's not that I don't know that. It's just, it's not my job. In time, and what do I mean by in time? In years is the time I'm talking about. 2 to 5 years, our relationship might mature to the place where if she's trying to sneak out with too much makeup on, or those T-straps that you've told her she's not to wear out on a Friday night, I might be able to say, Amrit, T-strap, not working. And she's going to know I'm actually just protecting her tuchus, is what she's going to know when I do it then, because our relationship is already there. Okay. There's a saying in step family life that's really, really important for parents and step parents to understand. And that is that a step parent almost always wishes that a parent would set firmer limits on their children, limits that they're not able to set. They're just not able to do it. Right? But a step parent wishes that they could, but they're just not able. Okay. And a parent wishes that a step parent could love their kids the way they love them. And a step parent can't.
Yeah.
They don't have that history. They didn't spend getting up in the middle of the night, night after night, and be thrown up and cleaning dirty diapers. And they don't have that to lean into. They don't have that chemistry in their bodies. And so there's an inherent conflict there. I wish you, so I remember my partner would say, why on earth can't Ben just remember to put the liner in the dog poop can when he cleans the pen? Like, I don't know, maybe because he's 12. And for me, it was like, oh, well, at least he cleaned the pen. And for her, it was, but he didn't reline the can. So that's a really good example of she needed me to be more firm than I was able. And I wish she could just been more compassionate than she was able. Right?
So important.
It just is, yeah.
If you could pick the top 3 takeaways from this book, what would you want people to know about?
Absolutely. The top one is the slower you go, the faster you'll arrive. It's counterintuitive. But if we could just slow down to the speed of actual relationship building with children and new romantic partners, or children and their soon-to-be step-sibs, if we could just realize that the time that we spent falling in love, they now need that time too, that relationship building time. I think that's a really big piece. I think the other is really, another one would be appreciating the growth and development pieces. We spent a lot of time on that in the book. I think that insight is extremely helpful to parents and step parents. I think the third piece that is really, really important is that becoming a step parent is a prolonged job interview. What do I mean by prolonged? Oh, it could be, again, 2, 3, 4, 5 years before you are actually accepted in the role that you've been functioning in or attempting to function as well as possible in. And that's by a co-parent as well as children. When a co-parent can accept a new step parent in their children's life, that is a full-on blessing. That is such a good thing. And so understanding the importance and the respect involved in building a parenting coalition. Just because you marry someone does not give you the right to suddenly step in and start wielding a lot of power. You're going to hurt yourself as well as other people, but most importantly, kids will get hurt in the process. So I would say those are the 3 biggest pieces, the 3 big takeaways.
Thank you, Karen.
Were there any parts of the original manuscript that were cut in the final copy? Any topics that you had to, or that you decided to take out?
Well, that is actually a story because we wrote that entire book. Patricia and I met in San Francisco. She lives in Boston, as you may or may not know, or that part of the world out there, the Northeast, closer to you, Amrit. Anyway, we decided to meet in San Francisco because we'd never met. So we have the whole first draft of the book is done. We sit down and in this Airbnb in San Francisco, absolutely amazing, fabulous place for us to stay, great view, and we trashed the whole thing. So if you want to know, were there things that got removed? We basically said,
wow,
time out, start over, reorg,
Wow.
boom. So it was amazing. And the second cut of the book, which is really close to what you read, obviously that tossing the salad and starting over and pulling things together in a new way and finding a different flow and rhythm was really important. So I would say, yeah, there was a lot. And then it all got added back in and I couldn't tell you what actually got left out.
Yeah. And so it sounds like it was, it's not necessarily that there were particular things that were cut, but you're describing it was a whole overhaul. And, what I can tell you from the reader's perspective, of course, I didn't read the original manuscript, but what I can tell you from the reader's perspective goes way back to the beginning of our book club today, where I said it was a very easy read. And so I don't know what the other read was, whether it was easy or hard or organized or disorganized, but whatever you did, that rewrite is amazing, because it was so easy to read. And as a divorce professional, I sometimes read very difficult books, as far as really kind of hard to get through books. And then I read really easy to get through books. But the divorcing family or the reorganizing family, like into a step family, they need books that are really easy to read, because otherwise they're not going to get through it. 275, 300 pages or so. It's really difficult, of course, for them to get through. So as an audience of this book, I really appreciate how easy it was to read. So I'm glad you rewrote it. Whatever that first to the second draft became,
Right.
I'm glad
And
to see that.
so imagine my focus of the 35 years of work was on the front end. It was people becoming parents, marrying, then divorcing, getting their kids settled in 2-home families. That was my scope. And Patricia's picked up where mine left off. Hers started with people who had been divorced, who are starting to date, who are falling in love, who are getting married, who are moving in together and creating a step family, and then potentially that coming to a close. So we had this whole span between the two of us, but there wasn't a lot of overlap. And so I think what happened between the first write and the second write is we really brought everything together in a way that worked. Yeah.
It's great.
And our final question of today is, what makes your book different and unique to other books on similar topics?
Great question. Well, I'd like to think that it is a research-supported book that anyone can read, whether they know how to. I mean, it doesn't have research studies in. I want to really help people know that when I say research-supported, what I mean by that is the advice and the guidance has been supported by the research, not that the research is included. It's not dry in any way. So between that it's something that you really can rely on. I think the anecdotes are very, very, very real. They're drawn from our own personal experiences. They're drawn from amalgams, of course, of many, many clients over the years. So I think that those are things that bring a really personal element to whatever position you have, whether you're the dating partner, the parent, the dating partner who's also a parent, the kiddo, the co-parent. I mean, I have co-parents who read this when their now co-parent is falling in love. So, it's like, I'm still just the co-parent over here, but my former husband or wife are falling in love. So I need this information too, because it's going to impact our kids. So, yeah. And so I don't know of any other book that does that. So in answer to your question, I don't know that there's another book out there that does that.
Well, and I certainly haven't found one. I'm very thankful to have read the book and really to have done conscious reading of the book. There's one thing just to read through it, but really in order to be able to discuss it, I feel like I've digested it, and it's really been very impactful for me in my own practice. And I hope that our community members here at Up a Notch Learning are able to enjoy the book. I'll show you the cover once again, and don't forget that the book is also available in our book library. There's a link to Amazon Canada and Amazon USA to be able to buy the book if it's of interest to you. And all of Karen's other books are also in the book library for purchase through Amazon. Karen, can you just remind our viewers as to what your other books are, the names of them, so they can have a look for them?
I can, but I first feel like I need to say that all the stickies don't come with the book. So if you
this is called active reading.
Wait a minute, I want to show you my stickies.
I'm just saying, like, holy cow, right?
Yes.
Oh, these two are wonderful. So the other books, my first handbook was the co-parenting handbook that some people may have read when they were getting divorced. And it really is all the practices and protocols, again, for how to build a two-home family and a healthy co-parenting relationship. Not that it's easy, but it's doable. And so it's the how-tos. It's chock full of how-tos for that. Then there's the parenting plan workbook, which parents often pick up when they realize they're going to need to create a parenting plan, and that has a series of videos that take people right along through the workbook with them, done with an attorney, myself and an attorney. Those are for free on my YouTube page, by the way. And so what else have I done? I think those are the three biggies. I have some little books, but
yeah, there was another one that's just a really small one. I can't think of it off the top.
It's family
it's a white cover.
Family-centered parenting planning. And that's actually free download on my website if anybody wants that. And that just is really an FAQ on how to navigate making sure that you stay family-centered when you're going through a divorce and developing a parenting plan.
Karen's resources will also be right as a link right underneath our book club here in our membership portal. So there will be a direct link to all of Karen's information, including those YouTube links, are all on the website. So we want to really thank you, Karen, for joining us today in our book club. And of course, Amrit, thank you again so much for joining us.
Well, certainly my pleasure. And it's so great to be with both of you. So thank you so much. And people know that they can, I hope they know they can email me, and I'm accessible even though I'm down here in the US. Not very far. I think of it as neighbors.
Absolutely. And your contact information will also be under the contributors section and underneath this book club. So we welcome you to contact Karen if you have any questions or wanted to talk about the book anymore. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.